Hello and welcome. I am your host, JP John Poz from the Two Man Power Trip, and joining me is the former WCW and ECW World Tag Team Champion, one of the greatest minds and bookers ever in the history of the business, the Games Master, the Taskmaster, the Devil himself, Mr. Kevin Sullivan. Kevin, how you doing today, sir?
Good, JP. How are you, my friend?
Doing okay, but I feel like the wrestling business just stinks. When one passing with Ole Anderson, and then recently we just found out another passing in the bodyguard Virgil. Recently, just passed away as well.
Yeah, I can't say enough good things about Virgil. He had quite a run. He made the most of his ability. And I'll tell you a story about Virgil. When I was in WCW, I get a call like at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and a guy couldn't make it for some reason. The show. I pick up the phone and I call Virgil, and I'd say, Virgil, there's a plane ticket waiting for you in Pittsburgh. It leaves in 2.5 hours. Can you make it? Yeah, I got it, brother. He do that time and time again. I never was had anything but great rapport with him. Uh, you know, some guys said some mean stuff about him at the end of his life. The guy was trying to feed his family and himself. Uh, and again, he made the most of his ability. He had quite a run there with DiBiase for a while, right? He
Yep.
even beat DiBiase at WrestleMania. Then he was the fifth member of the NWO. I mean, uh, he knew his role. There was never any bitching. And after his run was over, every independent show that I would go on, he'd be there. He had quite a run in the independents too, especially in Ohio for Joe Pizza. Did you ever hear the name?
No, it doesn't sound very familiar now.
Yeah, Joe. Uh, when guys could work outside shots for a while for WCW, Joe was drawing 3 and 4 thousand people in these arenas with guys like Virgil, Brutus. I mean, they had quite a run up there for a while.
Why does he get the bad reputation, Virgil?
Uh, People are mean. You know, he did some, he was trying to sell us pictures in different places where you normally wouldn't.
Yep.
I mean, it was, what did you expect him to do? Stay at home and do drugs or something? I mean, I never saw him drink. Now, I don't know if he did. I never saw him impaired. He came to work, and there's got to be something said positive about a guy that does that. You know what I mean? And he lasted a long time in different
Yep.
roles, you know. And I love that one when they introduced him. Do you remember that Pacific interview? It was a vignette. Vince had done the Rocky thing where he ate the raw eggs. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And
Yep.
then Virgil cracked the eggs and put it up and then put it down, didn't drink it.
Yeah.
There was some. I think people like to take shots at people when they're down. All I can say about him was that he was always there, did the best of his ability, and God bless him.
if you look at it, that lonely Virgil stuff that they tried, they thought that was funny, and the Virgil wrestling superstar. Remember, he had that little
Yeah.
tablecloth, whatever that he used to always bring out. They used to always try to make fun of him about that, even though he was being quite a hustler, I thought, and trying to make money.
Yeah, I mean, was it better for him to do that or stay at home and do nothing? I mean, uh, he was a teacher. Were you
Really?
aware of that? Yeah,
No.
yeah, he was an elementary school teacher. Now, I don't know if he was one that filled in or what, but he worked hard. I mean, yeah, you can make fun of people, but what would you have done in his position? He had made money, he had probably spent a lot of money because he was making a lot of money up in WWE and for us too. I just can't say enough good things about him. I don't think you can knock anybody for trying as hard as they did, and he tried hard.
That was the thing too. I felt like that lonely Virgil stuff. They were trying to put him down. They tried to make a joke out of it, but he really turned it around because I don't know if they noticed, but he was getting real bookings for a while. I knew a guy out of New York used to book him all the time, and he did pretty good. So he turned it
Yeah.
around.
Same thing with the guy in Ohio. He used them every show. And the guy, when we were able to sing guys out, he used them every show. And the guy ran about 8 shows a month.
Wow.
Yeah, and like I said, they draw 3 and 4 thousand people. So, you know, I remember Brutus one time went there, and this is when he was a disciple. He looked like $1 million.
Yep.
And he got in the ring to sign pictures. And I'm not bullshit you. He must have had 1,000 people buying his pictures at $15 or $20 a pop.
Wow.
Yeah. So I mean, the guy wasn't afraid to go to work. People knock people for not showing up and dogging it. He tried his best. They put him in some bad situations.
Yep. Lost some sound from you. You were saying about Virgil and being able to get a bunch of bookings and make some real paper.
Yeah, he was and like I said, the Ku Klux Klan thing, and they hung him. I mean, think about that. You think that would happen today?
No,
No,
definitely not.
no.
But he was like a legit athlete. Like when he was younger, he did wrestling. He played football, even almost like in college. He was a bodybuilder. Tony Atlas found him, so he was like a legit athlete. I think people kind of thought he was maybe a little bit of a joke because he had the bodyguard gimmick, but he was a legit athlete.
Yes, he was. And again, he made the most of what he could with his ability.
when you look at it too, when he goes into WWF, he's Ted DiBiase's bodyguard, but that's legit straight heat. Like, as DiBiase was super over. So as soon as you're paired with him, you by proxy are super over. So he was in a perfect spot.
Oh yes, without question. I mean, and then he was in the match with Andre, and when Andre beat Hogan, right? He was involved in that.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, the double, the twin referees.
Yep.
So I mean, he was involved in a lot of mainstream things that happened, and why people took shots at him, uh, and not shots at guys that didn't deserve the 17 chances. He never caused a problem. Uh, I just can't say enough good things about him. And like I said, God bless him. Rest in peace.
And the thing is, too, okay, Virgil, he's the bodyguard. Guy was on TV basically late '86, really '87 when he gets paired with DiBiase. He's with DiBiase until '91, so 4 or 5
Right.
years there. Then he feuds with DiBiase. Then he's a babyface, basically there to like '94, '95. So if you look at it, guy had almost an 8, 9 year run in WWF, which means a ton of TV time. And this is the Hogan era, and this is
Right.
super popularity. He's almost mainstream because he's on TV so much.
Yeah. To me, he was mainstream. And obviously, they drew money when he turned babyface, you know, and it helped support the card. I mean, was he limited? Yeah, but there's a lot of guys limited, and he tried his best. You can't knock a guy that tried his best, and I never understood why people just took shots at him.
Easy target, I guess, for them. But
Yeah,
I loved it when he used to say, "Oh, I was in the main event." Technically, he was like of the Hogan Andre main event or
yeah,
SummerSlam '88. I used to love when he would say that because for some reason that ruffled feathers. But he's not necessarily saying he wrestled. He's saying he was a part of the main event. So he was
yeah.
being truthful.
Yes, he was. I mean, come on, you know, wrestlers have a way. All of us have a way of seeing it through rose-colored glasses. Our popularity, our drawing power, and he was involved in some of the biggest angles. I mean, he was there when Hogan lost to Andre,
Yep,
the fifth member of the NWO. Somebody thought highly of him, right? They
definitely.
made didn't Hogan make him head of security?
Yes, yes. Technically, he would be, I guess, technically speaking, the seventh member of the NWO because you had sixth, and then I guess technically he
Yeah,
would be seven. But yeah, but still, very early on in the NWO, before NWO got watered down, he was a big part of the group. And remember, they were making the joke, we got Vince," and people were like, "What, Vince, Vince?" And Vincent,
yeah,
him as that name, obviously making fun of McMahon. Awesome.
yeah, yeah,
Hey, hey, when he turned on DiBiase in WWF for the $1 million belt, the crowd went nuts. So he
yeah,
was over for a period of time. And then when he was teaming with Piper and stuff like that, super over.
yeah. And then he had the thing with Ted's Jr.,
Oh yeah,
right?
when they brought him back in, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
they did the $1 million man belt thing. Yep,
yeah. So I look at him as a huge success.
part of WrestleMania 7, part of WrestleMania 8. Obviously in DiBiase's corner a bunch of times too. So he, I don't know, it's crazy he doesn't get the respect he deserves. But I liked it the last few years on like the convention scene back when he used to like basically bring himself in. Needed to do that no more. He was getting booked like crazy all over the place, especially New York and hot markets where they were having conventions like crazy. So it was good
Yeah,
to see a turnaround.
yes, it was, and he deserved it.
Now, the NWO stuff is great too because not only is he in WWF for 9 years, he gets to be part of the NWO, the biggest angle of all time, and everybody remembers him because he was Virgil from the WWF. So it was instantly like, wow, it's a WWF takeover. Like it was very believable that he was a part of the group.
Right, right. And you brought up a good point. He had come in and kind of solidified the invasion because nobody really knew of him until he went to the WWF, right?
Right. Absolutely.
So, I mean, he was another one that was a WWF renegade, and it helped bolster the story.
And if you think about it, so much TV time in WCW as well, 96 to basically 2000. So I mean the guy was on TV, you could say 13, 14 years, part of the two biggest companies when they were the hottest. So everyone was very familiar with him.
Right, right. I mean, it's like I said to you, not many guys would pick up the phone because you had caller ID back then. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So he knew, he could have bypassed picking up the phone if he didn't want to go. But I mean, you call a guy at home and he didn't live by the airport. So it was a 45-minute drive, an hour drive for him. And I'd say, you're leaving in 2.5 hours. He never disappointed us.
When you look at his just career and you could say, wow, he had so much TV time. He had more TV time than some big names you would think of. You know what I mean? Like he was on TV maybe double the amount of some other big stars. So when you talk about TV equity and times with the eyeballs on him, can't knock him, even though people tried and people want to, and people want to knock, can't knock a guy that was on TV for that long, for that period of time. Pretty sweet.
And do you, JP, do you remember when he had that undefeated streak when he first came in on Saturday Night Live? I mean, Saturday night.
Love that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so he was, I don't understand why people wanted to crap all over him because he was a good person.
I don't get it. I guess it's because he's a hustler and he always people thought he was trying to pull a fast one or something, even though I don't know if he necessarily was. And the few times that I met him and worked with him, he was a sweetheart of a guy. He was a nice guy. He was on time. He was there when he was supposed to be. He did what he was supposed to do, signed whatever he needed to sign. It was great for me.
Yeah, I mean, he would, like you said, he'd be there on time and he'd stay later if the promoter asked him to.
I had a guy I knew who this is at like a mall or something. Him and his little brother went to go meet him and get an autograph. So he signed the autograph for the brother, the little brother, and he turned around to the big brother. He was like $20. So I just love that story because it's him being a hustler, but also he's not signing the autograph for free. Come on, he's not giving out free autographs at the mall here.
Right, right.
The signing you got to pay the guy. So he's a little bit of a hustler.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that what these conventions are about? You get to meet the guy and
Yeah, oh
get
yeah.
an autograph. I mean, they do it in baseball, football, every sport.
You gotta love that a guy like that with all that TV time and and all that time in WWF and WCW is kind of like remember forever in a certain aspect. I was talking to a guy today and I said, "Oh, you probably don't know that much about wrestling, but I just saw Virgil pass away." He goes, "Oh, I remember him. I remember who that is." And I showed him a picture. He goes, "Yeah, yeah, that's Virgil." He's like, "Yeah." So this guy hadn't watched wrestling in 30, 40 years. He said he knew who Virgil was. So pretty powerful.
Yes, yes.
I don't know about that weird West Texas redneck thing. I don't know if you were booking at that time, but remember he was like
No,
Curly Joe or no Curly Bill. He was in the West Texas rednecks. Really, it
yeah,
was just a joke, but it was kind of silly.
that was Dusty's uh, invention. And, I Dusty had this flair of putting something that which one doesn't belong and making it work.
Yep.
Like
Yep.
he puts me in the black robe with the varsity club. You know, what doesn't belong there? And he made things work.
Right.
And he did it for a little bit of levity for the wrestling program. I mean, the West Texas Outlaws when they feuded with Master P. Remember that?
Yep. Oh yeah. And when Russo came in, he did that powers of B angle. Remember, they all had names. The Harris brothers were Gerald and Patrick. Obviously, Gerald Briscoe and Pat Patterson. When Virgil joined the group, his name was Shane. So he
Yeah.
was the Shane McMahon. Obviously, Russo was Vince. So I mean, they and Oklahoma was JR. So they had their role making fun of each guy at WWF. But it was just funny that Virgil still had a role there in 2000. He was Shane.
Yeah. I mean, he had. When did you say he started in WWE? F
Basically, late
80,
'86.
86 to 2000. That's
Yeah,
14
14, 15
years.
years. Yeah, yep.
Yeah.
Pretty crazy. I,
Yeah.
I know a lot of guys that would sign up for that in a heartbeat.
Absolutely.
Your own action figure, get immortalized. Yeah, not
Yeah.
too bad for Virgil.
Plus, he was in the games, right?
Oh, of
The
course, yeah.
video
Yep.
games. Yeah. So,
And like you mentioned before, they brought him back in like 2010 when Ted DiBiase Jr. had the $1 million belt. He was his bodyguard for a few weeks. Obviously, Ted Jr. being the heel that he is turns on his own bodyguard because he failed him. But it was a perfect booking for Virgil for those few weeks in 2010.
yeah. And then didn't he appear in AEW 2 or 3 times?
Yeah, he was doing that thing with Jericho.
Yeah.
Basically, he was, but they weren't calling Virgil because they don't know the name. They were calling him Soul Train Jones. So very funny stuff with AEW.
Right. That was his original name, I believe.
Yes. Yep. I just love that everyone knew who it was immediately. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that the star power of Virgil, if you will. I know people would joke and laugh and say it's not true, but the star power of Virgil, they knew who it was immediately and they caught on to the joke. And he was in on the joke.
Yeah. And he took it very well.
And then he was saying stuff with which kind of got him famous for a while with those two brothers that did the same thing for the Sheik, the Olive Garden shtick. Remember, he was talking about how he loved the unlimited breadsticks and
Yeah.
all that stuff. And they, I guess that's a way to after your wrestling career, keep your social media career and content creation career going. Is that you do this like kind of fake Virgil thing where he's like obsessed with Olive Garden.
Yeah. Yeah. And didn't he have a little line that about Jericho is a lot like Olive Garden? Unlimited breadsticks and whatever.
Yeah. And the fans loved it. I remember they were loving that stuff. It's pretty funny. I mean, he's making fun of himself, but he's making fun of Jericho. Like it was good.
Yeah. And, my hat's off to Jericho. I mean, he's reinvented himself time and time again. And, he's had one of the greatest runs of all times. And he wouldn't have taken a guy that couldn't handle the job and help Chris to keep reinventing himself. And the pairing of Virgil with Jericho is a head scratcher to some people, but obviously Chris knew, right,
Yep.
that he still had name recognition.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
And use a little comedy spin on it as well because he was doing the Olive Garden kind of breadstick gimmick, if you will.
yeah, yeah,
He did, I guess, kind of for a period of time because of DiBiase Senior, get a bit of a bad reputation because he would say that they're both going to be at events and only it was only Virgil. So I mean, he was trying to be a hustler. He was trying to be a worker a little bit, and maybe get some more bookings than normal. But eventually, he would get bookings on his own. So that kind of where it came in.
yeah. Uh, you know, I think he got some heat with Ted over that, and rightfully so.
Right.
You know,
Yep.
so
Do you think that the Virgil name was after Dusty? I mean, was that a make fun of
oh
Dusty's
yeah,
ghost?
yeah, absolutely.
Why do you think they deny that? Because it seems pretty obvious that it was.
Dusty's one of the most beloved figures in the history of the business. They don't want to take the heat over that, I don't think. Do
Probably
you?
Probably not. Yeah, just because it just sounds terrible. It's like, wow, the guy's the most popular guy. Oh, you're trying to make fun of him as he's a bodyguard. You know what I mean? Like, what is he? You saying he's Jim Crockett Jr.'s, right hand man? He's his bodyguard. Like, he's not the booker. He's not the head guy. He's just Jim Crockett Jr.'s side piece, kind of thing.
Yeah. Uh, yeah, he when you break it down like we have, it shows you he had great longevity.
Yep. Crazy. Even, I mean, was that 2020, 2021, whatever that was with AEW? So not that long ago, he was still making appearances in the wrestling business. And he hadn't made an appearance, or his initial appearance in the wrestling business would be 85. So, I mean, phew, almost 40 years that he was basically in and around the business there. Pretty impressive.
Did he box?
That I'm not sure of. I know he played football and I know he wrestled. I don't know about boxing.
The reason why I ask, you know, I guess you can get dementia at any age, but one of the things that he got late in his life, was dementia, and he was
Yep.
only 61 when he passed.
Yep. And he had 2 strokes too. So he had
Yeah.
dementia and he had 2 strokes, and then he got diagnosed with colon cancer, so a rough ending there, and like you said, he's only 61, so not that he was particularly that old either.
Right, right. You
But,
know,
RIP Virgil for sure. What do
yeah.
you think his legacy is, just overall?
I'm going to say he was a good man.
He was one of those guys that you just can't forget. If you talk, I mean, talking about that era, especially if you're my age, that era of wrestling. I just mentioned to another buddy of mine because he said to me this morning that Virgil had passed, and he's like, "Oh my God, remember this, remember that." It's like you just remember stuff from that era. Just to me, even more so than I can remember what happened on WB TV list. Where you just remember when he turned on DiBiase. Remember when the Hogan chucked his ass out of the ring, and like you just remember stuff from his career because you're from that golden era of wrestling. That Hogan era was the era.
Right. As time goes by, we have a tendency to forget. But he was in the middle of a lot of things.
And I know Bischoff was saying, "Oh, I don't know if he should have been a member of the NWO in hindsight," but I think he was a perfect member for the NWO. Former WWF guy, which he kind of said too that he was on WWF TV for so long, so it's kind of vindicated. But I think he was perfect for the NWO as well.
Oh, I do too. I do too. I mean, you brought him in, and I think you got the most out of him that you could have.
And hey, when I met him a few times, I mean, talking about years ago as a fan, he was super nice to me and all the other fans, giving people his wrist tape, giving them, anything that they wanted from him, except for a shirt. He had the NWO shirt. He said, "I need this." He was just super cool to everybody, and he was supposed to be the heel on these indie shows, but he was super cool and obviously always in the main event as well.
Right. And it just goes to show you what you said, reinforces what you said. He was on TV for such a long time in important situations. Like you said, maybe he wasn't in the main event wrestling, but he was there. He was part of the uh, program, and he did his best. And people still, like you said, because he was on TV so long, people still remember him.
Big time.
Yeah.
Now, changing gears here to another guy that passed away, unfortunately, Ole Anderson, somebody you have known for decades, 50 years probably. You've probably known Ole for. When was the first time you actually met Ole? Would it be back in 75?
Uh, I think I met Ole when I went. Was he on the first Omni show? Do you know?
Most likely. I'm not 100% sure, but most likely I would say yes. He's like the king of the Omni, if you will. Yeah.
Yeah. Me and Mike Graham came up, and Eddie Graham came up to the opening of the original Omni, and me and Mike wrestled there. But I think that's where I met Ole.
What did you think of Ole Anderson? Because so many people have so many different opinions of him. Some of them negative, and obviously some of the positive. But what did you think about Ole?
Uh, I would have loved to found out how Ole was raised. He was a different cat.
Hmm.
I mean, he. I know a friend of mine, Jeff Buchanan. Have you heard of? He's the Mighty
Oh
McAfee.
yeah, yeah.
Jeff was his money guy that did his money, watch his money, and he said Ole was well off. Ole drove uh, a moderate car, even though he was making a lot of money. Uh, he was very tight with his money, but Ole was a no bullshit type of guy. And he rubbed a lot of people the wrong way because he was very gruff, very gruff. And he could be a little bit jealous, where, you know, where he said about Rick on the interview. He didn't want Rick in the territory. That's why he made him the world champion. First of all, Ole didn't make him the world champion. That was voted on.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And I don't even know if Ole was on the committee of who voted the champion in. But, obviously he took Rick's personally, confronted Rick on numerous occasions. And who wouldn't want Ric Flair on their cards in the early 80s and mid 80s?
Right. Of course. Yep.
So, and then, him and Dusty, he was jealous of Dusty. But one of the things about Ole, he didn't bullshit you. And I appreciated that. If he thought you were the shits, he was going to tell you were the shits. Was he right on a lot of things? No. He told The Undertaker he'd never make it in the business. I mean, so, and Ole, as smart as Ole was, he didn't appreciate the business evolving. You
Seemed
know,
like it.
yeah, he wanted to go back to the early 60s when he broke in. Well, you can't do that. The world changes. You know what I mean?
Yep. He definitely had that old school feeling, but they kept going back to him as Booker, all those years. So they must have had some faith in him. But I know what you mean. I know. It just felt like going backward instead of going forward.
Yeah, and the thing about Ole, it's like a major league manager. They get fired, they go to another team, right?
Yep.
Because people are comfortable with what they did in some stage of their career.
When you look at it too, it's like, okay, when he does try to kind of be somewhat forward thinking with the booking, he created the Black Scorpion, which was like, oh, like he tried and it was terrible. It was just not executed at all to any sort of excellent standard.
The whole story on that, do you know the backstory?
No.
That was supposed to be Al Perez.
Oh, right, right, okay.
You know, uh, the Black Scorpion, he had an idea, and the kernel of the idea was good, but he didn't know, or maybe time had passed him by, that he was still with that angle, booking week to week, not knowing like how will go through the bloodline. I'm sure they had that mapped out for quite a while, right?
Yep,
Which steps they were going to take. Ole was flying by the seat of his pants then. But Ole drew a lot of money, against Dusty, against Flair. With Flair, the Horsemen, he was one of the original Horsemen.
yep. What do you think was the issue with Flair, though? It's because he was a star in that territory before Flair was, so that when Flair came in and became a bigger star, he was a bit bitter about it?
I kind of think that Ole didn't like Rick's personal life, and that tripped over into business. That shouldn't have. It's not Ole's business how Rick conducted his personal life. And I think, too, you got to remember, Ole was in Minneapolis, started in Minneapolis,
Yep,
and uh, he kind of looked at Rick as the what was Rick Rude, not Rude, Rick Rhodes, when that's what Flair wanted to be, Dusty's younger brother. Do you remember
yep,
that?
yep.
I think he looked at Rick as that 310-pound guy with the buzz haircut and couldn't wrap his head around it.
And if you look at it too, he kind of, like you're saying, couldn't change with the times, didn't want to. So once he gets that picture of Rick in his head, oh, I'm a bigger star than him, kind of thing. I'm a bigger star than him and Dusty.
Yeah, yeah.
When
Uh,
when you were with Ole back in like the '70s and stuff, was he different than when he became like a booker, or was he the same kind of ornery Ole Anderson that we all know and love?
he was the same Ole Anderson. He never changed. He was opinionated. He thought he was right. I mean, again, I'd like to know his childhood. His brother was a carpenter or a laborer, and his brother committed suicide on the job by taking a nail gun and shooting it into his head.
Oh my God.
So there was some backstory there. Uh, and Ole was a cold hearted guy. So, you know, nature or nurturing, what is most important? I kind of believe that nurturing, you know, it seems to me that when you find out someone's background and they've committed a horrendous act, they usually have problems from their childhood, stemming from their childhood. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And we're also victims of our environment. So
Yeah, it's almost like the day and age. I know people hate to say that and hear that, but it's like the day and age of that day and age is they were just generally tougher and just I mean it's just a fact. The maybe a little bit more ornery, especially depending on where you came from, and just say he said whatever he wanted to whoever he wanted whenever he wanted.
Yeah, Blackjack Mulligan knocked him out 3 times
Why?
because Ole being Ole.
That's I don't know about like the history of wrestling, but that's one guy I would never mess with. Blackjack Mulligan. Jeez.
Oh, I was in, tell you a funny story. Blackjack was the guy that really got me going in Florida because when I came in there, turned heel. The first night I was supposed to wrestle Jack Dusty had a finish. We were in Orlando, and he said, "Why don't you guys do a DQ?" And Jack said, "No, he's gonna beat me. He's gonna get on me. Then Kendall's gonna come down. He's gonna drop Kendall. Then Barry's coming. He's gonna drop Barry." And he said, "And then Big Boy, you come down. He's gonna drop you." So I had great respect for Blackjack Mulligan, but I'll tell you a funny story. I'm wrestling him in Miami, and we're building up to go to the Orange Bowl. Remember the Orange Bowl? The
Oh yeah.
University of Miami used to play.
Yep. Yep.
I get a Mulligan says, "I got an idea. I got some flash paper. I want you to throw a fireball in my face to get the DQ. We're going for a hangman's noose match in the Orange Bowl, right?" So I said, I gave Humperdinck, who's my manager, the flash paper. I said, "Make it big." Well, unbeknown to me, Humperdinck goes to a cop and gets one of the bullets. And they pull the powder out and put the gunpowder in the paper. I don't know it. Hump gives me a ball of flash paper that looks like a trash bag, right? It's so big. I light it and throw it, and the thing explodes. And I see Mulligan take the bump, and his mustache is on fire. I'm going, "Oh my God!" I'm going up, patting it out. "I got you, Jack. I got you." Oh boy. I mean, that Jack was a big man, over 300 pounds. The only hands I ever saw bigger were Andre's. He was a giant. I mean, and he could hurt you quickly.
And he's knocking out Ole Anderson 3 times.
Yeah, yeah.
Ole, I guess, was pretty tough though. He didn't really take heat after the first knockout.
No, no. He was Ole. Good, bad, or indifferent. He was Ole. I mean, and he drew money too. The Andersons were one of the greatest tag teams of all times for that era. You know, they would grab a hold and get heat by grabbing a hold.
And I talked to Dick Bourne, who's a big historian of the area for Jim Crockett Promotions and Mid Atlantic Championship Wrestling, and he was saying the Minnesota Wrecking Crew is kind of the reason why that area blew up. I mean, obviously there's Lars and there's Gene Anderson, but when Ole and Gene got together, you're saying that's when like that area kind of really was flourishing because the Minnesota Wrecking Crew.
Yeah, I mean, you know how when Ole broke in the business, whose nephew or cousin he was supposed to be, don't you?
When he first broke in, no.
Dick the Bruiser.
Oh, because that was his trainer, right?
No, I don't think he was his trainer. But that's how impressive Ole looked back in the day.
Right.
You know, so
I could see that. Yeah, with him and
yeah,
Dick the Bruiser. Yeah, for sure.
yeah, yeah,
And they obviously had a lot of interaction in AWA together.
yeah. You know, Bruiser's territory was Indiana mostly, but they worked all. He worked all the Chicago shows with Vern. I think he was a partner with Vern, and Vern used him quite a bit. Him and the Crusher.
Yep. Big time draws in that area.
Yes, big. Uh, Dick the Bruiser was one of the biggest stars on the early TV era. You know that, right?
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, Jim Barnett pushed him to the moon in Detroit, Denver. All the towns that him and Johnny Doyle had.
When you look at Ole, right? I mean, obviously AWA wrestled for, he did wrestle for Championship Wrestling in Florida. Obviously, we mentioned Jim Crocker Motion, but I feel like he made a big name for himself in Georgia Championship Wrestling, where, part of the ownership crew, I guess you could say. He was part of the
Right.
bookers. I mean, he was a big part of Georgia Championship Wrestling as well.
Right. And, he started his own, was it wrestling from Georgia, and brought the Road Warriors down with sans makeup,
Yep.
and just turned them loose, and they started to draw. And that's when Barnett and the Briscoes sold their interest to Vince.
Yep.
Yeah,
And it's crazy that Championship Wrestling from Georgia was doing better ratings than some of the, the Black Saturday, if you will, with Vince taking over. It did some better ratings than them.
right. Uh, you know, I believe too. The only guy that worked like the Road Warriors, non-selling stuff before them, might have been the Bruiser and the Crusher.
Definitely.
Yeah,
Very similar. Yeah.
yeah.
Obviously, the size difference is pretty crazy. Road Warriors versus those guys, but they were believable though.
Oh, Bruiser and the Crusher.
Oh yeah, definitely believable. But I'm saying Road
Yeah.
Warriors are way bigger than them. Yep.
Well, not really in height, but I want you to go back, and this is a lesson for our fans. I want them to go back and look at Bruiser back in 56, 57. He had to be on the gas. I
He
mean,
was
he was,
like
he was,
bloated, huge. Yeah.
he was, his traps were up to his ears. He was as big as Road Warrior Animal. And the Crusher was the same way, but not as muscular. He was a big, burly guy. So, and they had a lot of matches, early in their career with Bruiser and the Crusher.
When you look at Ole too, like he obviously had an eye for talent sometimes. Like Road Warriors, he saw, put them together, thought they would be great. Undertaker obviously was a big swing and a miss. Do you think he was a good talent evaluator and a good booker, or no?
Yeah, I think he was a good book. I mean, Tommy Rich, he saw something in Tommy. And Tommy was, I was on the first tour that left Atlanta for Ohio and West Virginia. Tommy was so over that it was like Elvis Presley. Girls were throwing their panties in the ring, throwing their keys to their hotel room. Tommy was over. Tommy was a good looking young boy. And he bled, and Ole pushed him to the moon.
What do you think was Ole's problem with Vince Jr.? Didn't like him, young punk, whatever, because he never worked there, and he didn't even want to be a part of it when it was the Black Saturday thing with the Briscoes. When the Briscoes sold out and Jim Barnett sold out, how come he just never wanted a part of that?
Ole was being Ole. He didn't think, he didn't see the writing on the wall that Vince was going to take it all.
He also just seemed like he would never wanted to work there either, or he didn't need to work there. Like you said, Buchanan is proof he had enough money; he didn't really need to work for Vince.
Yeah, back when he was booking Charlotte and Georgia at the same time, what year would that be? 82?
Yep.
He was making $500,000 a year.
Wow. In that era, wow.
Yeah.
pretty sweet, and a lot of respect there. He's booking two different territories at the same
Right,
time.
right. And then when Crockett, there was a time where they kind of separated Georgia. Dusty was the booker, separated Georgia from Charlotte. They had their own crew in Georgia, and I was there. Arn Anderson was there, Buzz Sawyer, Rick would come in, but I was working there, Charlotte, and Knoxville. And the honky tonk was with me. It's Wayne Ferris back then. And it was kind of separated. And I don't know if they were trying to, in their mind, use that almost like a training ground to kind of go into Charlotte, see if they could get young guys
Yep.
over to Georgia.
When you look at him, right, and what he was able to do in his career, like you said, he's making so much money. And you would think the highlight of his career would be okay, the new Minnesota Wrecking Crew. Arn comes in, which was total honor, and Arn loves him. I talk to Arn all the time about Ole. He absolutely loves him. Everybody has their own opinion. He loved him, was a mentor, but was quote unquote his brother or his cousin, but he wasn't really. But he acted like it,
Right.
and he acted like his older brother, really, to him. So when they create the Four Horsemen, when it's Arn, Ole, Tully, Flair, and you throw a little JJ Dillon into the mix as well, you would think that's the highlight of his career. And listening to so many interviews with him, and that was not. He actually, I mean, on TV, it was awesome to work, but behind the scenes, he did not like those guys. Outside of Arn, it seemed like.
Yeah, he didn't like Tully and Rick, but he liked JJ.
And for some reason, loved Arn.
Yeah, well, he understood that Arn was a hard worker, besides being an excellent worker. He worked hard, he never took a day off.
And to give him the Anderson name, too, it's like, you must like this kid.
Right, right.
And Arn says, made his career, making him an Anderson. Basically,
Yeah,
did make his career.
absolutely.
Did you love that Four Horsemen? Is that your favorite grouping of the Four Horsemen?
Probably, but I think Barry Windham was great in them too. Barry was, you've seen Barry in his prime.
Oh, amazing.
He got a rate up there in the top five baby faces of all times in his prime.
Absolutely. It is crazy though to look at like the Horsemen, right? With Ole a part of it and think like, wow, like they're partying, all this other stuff. He had nothing and wanted nothing to do with them partying and stuff. So he was a part of the group and it looked like it on TV, but behind the scenes, he was not a part of them at all. He would never go out with them.
No, he went his own way. He drove on his own. After the matches, he was gone.
Do you like that for a group? One guy really wanting nothing to do with the other guys?
Well, what you do in your personal life is your personal life. You know what I mean? It's not gonna,
Absolutely.
yeah, but it's there is a downside to it too. It's you feel the other guys feel like he isn't a member of the group because he's not partying with them.
So did those guys not like Ole?
No, they liked him. They respected him. That's for sure.
Seems like him and Flair butted heads quite a bit.
Yeah, yeah. There was, like I said, I think there was jealousy on Ole's part with Rick that he saw him back as the 310 pounder wanting to be Dusty's brother.
And not, the second most over wrestler in the world, pretty much.
Right, right.
when you look at that Horseman, what a crazy thing! Because I know they did stables and groups before that, but man, that is like the antithesis of great stables, or not antithesis. That's like the goal of what you want to be if you're a wrestling stable. You're creating a stable, like the NWO. It basically you can go back to the Horseman. Evolution, you go back to the Horseman. Generation X, you could go back and look at the Horseman. Right? That's like the group that kind of set it off as far as what you want to be in a stable.
And they were wrestling heels, and they got to be baby faces with the 18 to 49-year-old demographics. Kids were wearing suits, to the matches, cheering the Horsemen, you know.
It's funny. They would do that, and they would love Rick. But I noticed Arn and Tully, and of course Ole as well. But when they would do some dastardly things, the crowd absolutely hated them, and if Flair would associate with them, then they started hating Flair. But Flair was so cool that you almost love Flair and hate the other guys.
Right. I mean, Rick's interviews, I mean, football teams are doing his
Yeah.
interviews.
Yep. Can't deny that. But it's great, like when they turn on Dusty in the cage and he breaks his leg. I mean, they want
Yeah.
to kill Ole. I mean, when Ole stomps us, like they want to destroy Ole. I mean, he
Yeah.
just had heat beyond heat.
Yeah. That was I was there that night. That was one of the most heated I've ever seen a crowd because it came close to a full blown riot. If they didn't get out of there when they did, they would have had a full blown riot. Like you said, they were when he went back and stomped on Dusty's leg. Those people were. I think people hit the cage, didn't they?
Yes, big
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
When you look at the career of Ole and he starts to wind it down, he then basically gets kicked out of the Horsemen. Luger replaces him. What was the real reason? Was it because his son was starting his like wrestling journey and he wanted to follow along with his son and didn't want to wrestle as much? Because he was wrestling at this point for over 25 years. So he just kind of winding down his career as well?
No, his son was an amateur wrestler, so he wanted to go all the matches the son was having. So I think that was the decision why he stepped out.
Do you think that he wanted out of the group too? Like because he wasn't really fitting like a horseman per se?
No, I don't think it was that. I think it was mostly that he wanted to see his son wrestle.
Don't you think he's better off? I mean, Luger was awesome in the group, and it was perfect for Luger to get the rub. But obviously, WWF would do that years later. They would do with Batista and Orton, where you put the young guy with the older guy, and the young guy gets over because he's with those guys. So, I mean, it's the perfect formula that they kind of created with that gimmick with Luger and the Four Horsemen. But did you think Ole was okay as like a babyface? Because he kind of doesn't work as a babyface, to me anyway.
Uh, no, he's a heel. He's a heel. Uh, I think if you're saying why could he have lasted with them, I think he had enough. He wanted to spend some time with his family.
He does wind down his career. He's still wrestling a little bit in 1990 stuff, but he does basically wind down his career and kind of just he's finishing it off, if you will, and really heading more into back into the creative role. He's basically going to be a part of the booking committee, things like that. But before that, they kind of do a new horseman with Arn, Ole, Sting, and Flair. Tully, obviously, the story's out there. Tully was supposed to be a part of the group as well, doesn't make it, but Ole cuts some awesome ass promo on Sting. Basically, Sting, you're the number one contender, but just give up the title shot. I'll give you a little bit of time. You know what I mean? Basically saying Flair's the champion. We're going to back Flair, and Sting is saying no. Even though I'm a horseman per se, and I'm helping the group, I still want the title shot. And Ole cuts an awesome promo at Clash of Champions, basically saying, "We'll break your legs, kid, if you don't rescind on the title
Right,
match."
right, right. It was another step for Sting to come beloved, and to do with a nasty heel like Ole was brilliant.
he obviously was winding it down. He was going into more of the J.J. Dillon role, where he was going to kind of become more of the manager of the group than one of the wrestlers of the group. Do you like him in that role? Because he was a damn good talker.
Oh, he's a great talker. Great talker. He was dead ass serious.
He was always one of those guys, very believable. Like whatever
Yeah,
he said, it was very believable. Great look too.
yeah. He looked like a
So,
wrestler.
yep. So well, he was always a booker, but he becomes part of the booking committee. He becomes basically sometimes the lead booker for WCW. You always hear stories about him, though, and I got to ask you, and you got to give me an honest answer. Was he racist? Because that has been coming out after his death. I mean, I'm seeing all these fans online that never met him, have no recollection of him whatsoever, but they assume that he's racist because of stories and different things. What is your opinion of that?
I think he was a victim of his generation. Look where he came from. Minneapolis, right?
Yep.
Is there any city more white bread than that?
Mm, maybe somewhere in the South, but not up there. No.
No. Uh, he pushed Tony Atlas to the moon. He pushed Ray Candy. Uh, I think he just didn't like people in general. Didn't matter what color they were.
That's what I was gonna ask. I was gonna say, maybe people consider him racist, but maybe he just didn't like anybody.
Yeah, I mean, he pushed Thunderbolt Patterson.
I was gonna mention that to you because I interviewed Thunderbolt Patterson, and he said that was one of his best friends in wrestling, and that he loved the guy. And I
Yeah,
said, "So he's not racist?" And he said, "No." So, I mean, that's come from Thunderbolt Patterson, so you gotta take that, obviously, for real.
and that's a big voice on racism,
Yes,
right?
big time. Big time. Yep.
If it came from Thunderbolt, he's not going to bullshit. So, enough said, right? You
Yep.
know?
I know Teddy Long and Rocky Johnson always said
Yeah.
he was racist and stuff. They didn't like his use of the N word, and they didn't like a lot of the guys' use of the N word back then. But I don't know. Thunderbolt says no. So
Yeah. I mean, and I understand that Ole was a bully
yeah,
and he bullied Teddy and he probably used the N word around Rocky. But I think it was generally that he was a bully and took advantage of people. And he just generally didn't like people.
when you look at him and some of the things people have said, ornery, bitter. He was a mean guy, and this and that. So I don't know if it necessarily had to do with your race, creed, color, ethnicity, or
Right.
whatever. It's just he hated everybody.
Yeah, he was an equal hater of any race, you know?
I was supposed to do something with him years ago, and Arn had given me his number, and Arn basically was saying, "Hey, here's the guidelines. Here's what's going to happen. He's going to say, I don't know who you are, F you, F off, all this stuff, right?" So
Yeah.
I'm like laughing. I'm like, all right, that would kind of like be a badge of honor if that happened, but I don't know if that's going to happen. Literally, I called him. I said, Arn gave me his number, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So that continued the call for, 30 seconds. I got bought me a little bit of time. And then he goes, F you, F off. I'm not doing it. Blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
So I was
That's
like,
Ole.
wow, thank you.
That's Ole. He just
Yep.
didn't like people.
And his wife ended up calling me back. It was funny right after. I'm like, wow, he's calling back, but it was his wife. She goes, I apologize and blah blah blah. I'm like, no, it's like I actually thought that was kind of funny. She's like, oh my god, really? You're not a fan? I said, no, because that's what I was told was going to be said. So I was
Yeah.
kind of, if he didn't say it, I would have been mad.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Arn did give me the heads up. He said, brother, you're going to get cursed off. He didn't want to do it. He didn't want to do anything. But obviously, his wife told me too. At that point, he had MS and he wasn't feeling well, and he was very ornery. But I said, oh, okay. Even though I knew from years past he was ornery as well.
Right, right.
He does get fired with Bischoff, so he does not like Bischoff. And obviously, when the Bischoff era comes, he's going to be kind of gone, and his son won't be wrestling because his son was a part of the power plant. Did you ever see anything with his son maybe doing more, Bryant, like maybe being something more in the business, or no?
I think he had the stigma of Ole following him.
Which isn't good.
Yeah, no.
Do you think that he could have stayed around longer, just as far as like WCW booker, agent, stuff like that, or you don't kind of want somebody with a bad attitude like that?
Ole had gotten very, he was always outspoken, but he got louder as the years went on. So he pissed a lot of people off.
He's one of those guys that is just remembered from everybody. Everyone has a story about him, positive or negative, but everybody kind of remembers, especially like the big names in the business. They all have a much, I guess you could say much needed respect for him. But I feel like the respect level was always there, but they always kind of tell you the truth. Either they don't like him or they didn't like him or he had a bad attitude or not, but they did all respect him, it seemed like.
Yeah, I mean, he accomplished a lot and he was brilliant at times, but he couldn't evolve. He wanted to go back to 1965.
Can't do that.
No,
When you look at him as a booker in WCW too, it's like they gave him a bunch of different chances as booker, so they kind of liked what he was doing, but then they didn't like what he was doing. So there was like a respect thing, but then as far as like ratings or actually delivering, not necessarily on the ball, if you will.
right. And again, he was so outspoken, he hurt himself. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
So he died at the age of 81 years old. Obviously, a huge legend in the business, whether you like him or you don't like him.
Right.
Original member of the Four Horsemen. What's the legacy?
Well, he was one of the great heels, and without him, I don't think the Four Horsemen would have had the longevity they had. So all I can say too for him is rest in peace and God bless. You know.
R.I.P. Ole Anderson. And I would just mention this to everyone: go to the Orange Show on X or Instagram. He put up a great post about Ole and kind of basically saying wouldn't be there without him. He was his mentor, and a lot of positive things. So, if you want to read something from Arn Anderson on Ole, I would highly suggest checking out his socials there. So, really heartfelt stuff from Arn. Good stuff,
Yep.
as
Arn's a
you'd
good man.
expect from Arn.
Arn's a good man.
Now, let's wrap this bad boy up and head towards the plugs. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Two Man Power Trip. Kevin, what do you got going on in this crazy world?
Uh, Next Saturday I'll be at Chillicothe, Ohio, for
Ooh,
convention, and I'll be at the matches signing autographs.
that's always a big one, by the way,
Yeah.
with Dylan Hines and Bobby Fulton. Always
Yep.
a big show. I'm always impressed by their, I don't know, everything, their production, the amount of people they get. They do a great job.
They do an excellent job.
And of course, Old School by L.A. Taylor. Get that
Yep.
on Amazon.
Yep.
Thank you, everybody out there, for listening. See you right back here and next time. Have a good one, folks.